The side pedestrian gate of the academy was open by 4 inches. It was scheduled to remain sealed during arrival hours. Sergeant Elias Ward noticed it while conducting a routine perimeter sweep. The electronic latch showed no damage, yet the access log displayed no release entry. Children were already crossing the courtyard. Ward paused, hand resting on the radio. The gate moved slightly in the wind, as if someone had passed through moments earlier. Sergeant Ward raised a gloved hand before the academy vehicle fully crossed the inner courtyard line, the motion small but unmistakable, and the driver responded at once, braking smoothly so the engine settled into a low, contained hum that seemed louder than usual against the pale winter air. The young royal sat inside the secured transport with a tutor, unaware of the shift outside, while Ward stepped forward beneath the archway where iron met stone and the pedestrian gate stood slightly ajar by less than an inch, too narrow for casual notice, too deliberate to ignore. He had walked this route every weekday for 3 years. The gate was either locked flush or opened fully during authorized transitions, never resting in between. He touched the metal lightly, feeling the cold through his glove, then pressed it closed until the latch seated with a firm, final click. The courtyard smelled faintly of damp brick and trimmed hedges, routine and orderly, yet the air felt interrupted. He signaled 2 guards to position at opposing corners of the square, quiet containment without urgency, then requested CCTV review through his earpiece in a tone that did not rise above standard procedure. The response came measured, a 2-minute signal interruption near the pedestrian entrance at 0817, just before arrival. No override code logged, no maintenance ticket filed. Ward's eyes moved to the mounted camera dome above the arch, its glass uncracked, wiring intact. Interference without physical trace required internal access or proximity equipment. Neither option belonged to coincidence. School staff clustered near the main doors, greeting students, their expressions untroubled, unaware that the transport remained paused longer than routine demanded. Ward approached the head administrator and asked in even cadence whether any service teams had been scheduled for gate calibration that morning. She consulted her tablet, shook her head once, and offered a polite confusion that appeared genuine. Ward nodded, thanked her, and returned to the vehicle. Through the tinted window he saw the faint outline of the child's silhouette leaning forward slightly, perhaps curious about the delay, perhaps only adjusting a satchel. He did not allow himself to speculate beyond duty. Instead, he issued a soft containment directive. The vehicle would remain stationary while perimeter integrity was verified. No entry or exit through the pedestrian gate until further notice. His men moved without haste, but the geometry of their positions shifted subtly, closing angles, reducing blind spots. The courtyard, moments earlier ordinary, now felt arranged under invisible pressure. Ward requested system logs from Central Command, confirming again that no authorized remote access had been recorded during the blackout. Silence followed the inquiry, not confusion, but calculation, as headquarters searched for what should have existed and did not. Ward stepped back toward the gate and examined the hinge assembly, noting a faint smear near the lower bracket, oil inconsistent with standard maintenance lubricant, darker, recently applied. He crouched, inspecting without theatrics, aware that if this was a test, it was measured. Someone had studied timing, chosen a narrow window between patrol sweeps. The interruption lasted 2 minutes. That was sufficient to observe, not yet to act. He rose slowly, aware that holding the vehicle any longer would draw attention. Still, releasing it without clarity would concede uncertainty. The earpiece crackled again. No override issued, no remote diagnostics triggered, no anomaly detected beyond the brief feed loss. Ward watched the closed gate, weighing procedure against instinct, and for the first time that morning he felt the thin space between compliance and precaution narrow uncomfortably. Ward instructed the driver to maintain engine idle and keep doors sealed, then directed one guard to conduct a physical sweep along the interior fence line, while another repositioned near the service path that curved behind the academy's east wall, an area rarely used during arrival hours, but accessible through a secondary maintenance hatch. He informed Central Command that he was initiating Level 1 precautionary review, enough to justify delay, not enough to trigger public alarm. The response carried restrained skepticism. Equipment interruptions occurred occasionally, usually weather-related, and no external breach sensor had activated. Ward acknowledged the data without contesting it, though the sky above remained clear and still, the morning wind barely moving the flags along the rooftop. He walked the perimeter personally, boots echoing softly against stone as students continued entering through the main doors under faculty supervision, their chatter contained by distance and routine. Nothing appeared disturbed along the fencing, no cut mesh, no displaced gravel. Yet at the maintenance hatch, he observed a faint impression in the frost where a heel had pressed recently, angled toward the pedestrian gate rather than away from it. The frost elsewhere remained untouched, a thin silver crust that should have preserved uniformity. He did not photograph it immediately. Instead, he memorized the shape, the depth, the direction. Someone had stood there during the blackout, positioned where the camera dome's blind angle briefly widened during recalibration. That required knowledge of the system's micro-delay, information not accessible to casual observers. Ward reported the footprint and requested archival comparison of maintenance staff footwear patterns, keeping his voice steady, almost routine. Headquarters replied that records would be cross-checked, but reiterated no authorized personnel were scheduled. He straightened and looked toward the transport again. Inside, the young royal's outline shifted, the tutor likely explaining the delay as a minor check. The child's safety depended not only on visible barriers, but on eliminating ambiguity before it matured into threat. Ward made a decision that extended slightly beyond standard arrival protocol. He ordered the vehicle to reposition 10 meters deeper into the courtyard, closer to the academy entrance and farther from the pedestrian gate's arc. It was a subtle move, one unlikely to raise concern, yet it tightened the security envelope. The driver complied, tires rolling softly over stone. Then Ward instructed the gate to be temporarily disabled from internal latch access until a full mechanical inspection could be completed. As the mechanism locked electronically, he felt the perimeter contract into a more controlled shape. Central Command advised that a technician could arrive within 40 minutes. Ward calculated silently. 40 minutes was an acceptable delay for inspection, but it was also sufficient time for anyone observing to adjust their plan. He requested immediate dispatch instead, marking the situation as pattern deviation with juvenile principal present. The phrasing carried weight without alarmism. A brief pause followed before confirmation came that priority had been elevated. Ward returned to his position near the vehicle door, posture neutral, expression neutral. To anyone watching, the morning appeared only slightly slower than usual. To Ward, the absence of explanation was its own evidence. The 2-minute silence in the camera feed, the unlogged override, the fresh oil on the hinge, and the single impression in frost aligned too precisely to dismiss. He did not yet know the objective, only that someone had measured the environment carefully. As the academy bell rang faintly inside the building, signaling the start of lessons, Ward kept his gaze on the now sealed pedestrian gate, aware that whatever had tested it might not consider the matter finished. The technician had not yet arrived when Ward noticed movement beyond the outer pedestrian boundary, just past the trimmed hedgerow that separated academy property from the public footpath. And the figure stood still at first, as though orienting himself before approaching with deliberate restraint, dressed formally enough to suggest legitimacy, but not familiarity. Ward shifted his stance slightly, a silent signal to the 2 perimeter guards, and watched the man pass through the outer screening point after presenting identification to the constable posted there. The constable hesitated only a fraction longer than usual before allowing him forward under escort, which was enough to confirm that something in the exchange had required clarification. Ward stepped forward to intercept at the inner walkway, positioning himself between the approaching man and the deeper courtyard where the secured vehicle remained idling. The man introduced himself calmly as a distant relative of the young royal, his tone controlled but edged with urgency, explaining that he had been granted private authorization for immediate contact due to a family-sensitive matter that could not wait until afternoon. Ward listened without interruption, his eyes noting details rather than claims, the slight tremor in the man's left hand, the crispness of documents held too tightly, the absence of advance notification through official channels. Access to the young royal required pre-clearance logged no less than 24 hours prior, verified through palace security and academy administration. No such entry had appeared that morning. Ward requested the authorization code number associated with the clearance. The man supplied a sequence confidently, though he glanced downward as he recited it, as if recalling rather than reading. Ward transmitted the code through his earpiece to Central Command for verification, maintaining a neutral expression while seconds stretched thin in the winter air. The young royal's vehicle remained sealed behind him, engine still humming, tutor unaware of the exchange occurring within measured distance. The man shifted his weight and added that a palace official had assured him discretion, implying that excessive scrutiny might cause embarrassment. Ward acknowledged the statement but did not move aside. He observed the man's shoes, clean, city-polished, no frost residue on the soles despite the cold ground beyond the hedge. If he had approached recently through the outer path, frost should have marked the edges. Central Command responded quietly. The code did not correspond to any issued clearance. It matched the structural format of authentic codes, but failed authentication. Ward informed the man that verification was incomplete and requested he remain where he stood. The man's composure thinned slightly at the edges. He insisted that a senior palace aide had personally approved the visit that morning and that the delay could complicate an internal matter. Ward felt the earlier gate irregularity resurface in his assessment. Timing aligned too closely, camera interruption, unexplained footprint, and now an unscheduled relative invoking private authority. He signaled for a secondary guard to stand within arm's reach of the visitor, posture respectful yet firm. The courtyard remained outwardly calm, but Ward sensed the perimeter tightening again, this time around a person rather than a hinge. Ward requested the name of the palace official who had allegedly issued the authorization, and the man provided it after a pause brief enough to appear thoughtful but long enough to register calculation. Ward transmitted the name directly to Central Command for immediate confirmation rather than routing through standard queue channels. The reply returned with quiet precision. The named aide had not reported any private clearance and was currently logged inside the main palace complex attending a scheduled briefing. Ward studied the man's expression as he relayed that the authorization could not be confirmed. A flicker crossed the visitor's face, not surprise but adjustment. He shifted strategy, lowering his voice and suggesting that the matter concerned sensitive family correspondence that should not be documented openly, implying that cooperation would reflect discretion. Ward remained still. Discretion without record was the mechanism through which breaches matured. He informed the visitor that any communication could be transferred through official channels and offered to facilitate secure delivery if necessary. The man declined, stating that the message required direct acknowledgement from the child's guardian and could not pass intermediaries. That insistence tightened Ward's internal calculation. Legitimate family matters follow procedure precisely because they involved minors. Around them, academy staff continued routine operations, unaware that the conversation balanced on procedural edge.
Ward again noticed the absence of frost on the man's shoes and the faint scent of metallic cologne that did not align with the outdoor chill, details minor in isolation, cumulative in context. Central Command advised holding position while Palace Liaison attempted direct contact with the named aide for secondary confirmation. The man's urgency intensified subtly. His posture leaned forward, voice controlled but pressing. He stated that delay could create unnecessary internal consequences for those obstructing the request. Ward recognized the phrasing as calibrated pressure, invoking authority without displaying it. He responded evenly that security protocol was not obstruction but protection, and that any legitimate authorization would withstand verification. The man's gaze shifted briefly toward the sealed vehicle behind him, calculating distance, perhaps gauging response time. Ward adjusted his stance half a step to obscure that line of sight. A light wind moved through the courtyard, carrying the muted sound of classroom doors closing inside the academy. Central Command returned with confirmation. The named aide denied issuing any private clearance and requested immediate identification details of the individual invoking his authority. Ward relayed that information without altering tone. For the first time, the man's composure fractured visibly at the edges. He insisted a private conversation away from recording devices. Ward declined. He informed the visitor that until verification aligned, access would not be granted, and that remaining on restricted approach without authorization constituted a formal security concern. The secondary guard shifted closer, subtle but decisive. The man inhaled slowly as though recalibrating once more, and insisted he would wait for the aide's direct call. Ward nodded once, signaling that waiting was acceptable under supervision. As minutes passed, the stillness deepened rather than eased. The earlier gate irregularity and this unauthorized approach no longer felt coincidental. They formed the outline of coordination. Ward outwardly composed, yet internally he marked the convergence of anomalies, aware that the situation had moved beyond isolated error into deliberate testing of the perimeter. Ward did not allow the silence to stretch into comfort. The unauthorized visitor remained under quiet supervision near the inner walkway. Posture was strained but alert, while the academy's morning rhythm settled fully into lesson hours. From the outside, nothing appeared disrupted. That contrast unsettled him more than visible alarm would have. Central Command advised patience until written confirmation could be issued, formally denying the visitor's claim, a step required before escalating the threat level beyond preliminary containment. By regulation, Ward's authority permitted temporary restriction but not full lockdown without documented cause. He acknowledged the directive, though the convergence of irregularities continued to align with deliberate timing. The 2-minute camera interruption near the pedestrian gate, the unexplained footprint angled toward the blind spot, and now a visitor carrying structurally accurate yet invalid authorization suggested rehearsal rather than accident. He studied the man again from a measured distance. The visitor's breathing had steadied. Urgency was no longer overt. Instead, there was observation. That shift concerned Ward more than agitation would have. Agitation implied impulse. Observation implied adjustment. Ward requested that the visitor surrender his mobile device temporarily under security review protocol. The man hesitated a fraction too long before complying. The device was newer than standard consumer models issued locally, encased in matte black without visible carrier branding. Ward handed it to a guard trained in digital containment and instructed that it be placed inside a signal-blocking pouch without powering it down. If coordination existed beyond the courtyard, disabling transmission prematurely could trigger alternative timing. Headquarters questioned the necessity of signal isolation at this stage. Ward responded evenly that the earlier CCTV interruption demonstrated technical proximity. Preserving potential metadata justified caution. There was a pause on the line, then reluctant approval to proceed within observational parameters. Ward turned his attention toward the secured vehicle. The young royal would soon need to be escorted inside to avoid unnecessary delay that could raise questions among staff or classmates. Standard procedure dictated entry through the main doors under visible guard presence. Instinct suggested reducing visibility altogether. He contacted the academy administrator and requested access to the secondary internal corridor adjacent to the science wing, a route used during weather emergencies, but rarely during routine arrival. She expressed mild confusion, but complied after he cited equipment review near the courtyard, calculated distance and timing. The visitor's line of sight from his current position did not extend toward that corridor. However, any accomplice positioned beyond the fence line might still observe movement patterns. Protocol required waiting for written confirmation before altering the young royal's route. Instinct argued that patterns once observed should not be repeated. Ward weighed the risk of reprimand against the cost of predictability. He issued the decision quietly. The vehicle would reposition to the secondary corridor immediately, without announcement. The driver complied at once, steering away from the main entrance, while guards shifted formation smoothly, creating a moving perimeter that appeared routine to distant observers. Headquarters responded sharply through his earpiece, reminding him that route deviation required logged justification. Ward replied that justification would follow documentation. For now, the priority was reducing exposure during unresolved threat assessment. The vehicle disappeared behind the academy's east facade, out of the visitor's view. Ward remained in the courtyard, posture unchanged, as though nothing had shifted. Yet internally he recognized that he had stepped beyond passive containment into anticipatory defense. Once the young royal was secured inside the secondary classroom under controlled supervision, Ward returned his focus fully to the unauthorized visitor, who had noticed the vehicle's absence despite attempts to discretion. The man's composure tightened again, eyes scanning the courtyard as if recalculating angles that no longer aligned. Ward approached and informed him that the child was unavailable pending verification and that any further insistence would be documented as formal interference. The man responded with restrained frustration, stating that unnecessary escalation would reflect poorly on those responsible for access decisions. Ward registered the phrasing carefully. It implied expectation of internal leverage, not external force. Meanwhile, Central Command transmitted preliminary analysis of the visitor's identification. The documents were authentic in material composition, but digitally altered within the embedded chip, subtle modifications detectable only under deeper scan. That required technical sophistication and access to template formatting. Ward felt the pattern solidify. This was not a spontaneous family misunderstanding. It was structured proximity using partial internal knowledge. He requested immediate cross-reference between the visitor's supplied authorization code and any recent internal scheduling downloads from Palace administrative terminals. Headquarters hesitated. That query expanded the scope from Academy incident to Palace audit. Ward clarified that the earlier CCTV interruption and the visitor's timing suggested coordination possibly supported by internal data leakage. Silence followed, heavier than before. Finally, Command authorized discreet review, but cautioned that such inquiries would attract attention at senior levels. Ward accepted that consequence. In the courtyard, the visitor asked to make a call to resolve the confusion. Ward declined, stating that communication would occur through official channels only. The man's jaw tightened briefly before he composed himself again. Ward observed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the micro-movements of someone waiting for external confirmation that was not arriving. A guard approached quietly with preliminary metadata from the confiscated device, encrypted messaging application active within the last 10 minutes, signal pings logged near the academy perimeter earlier that morning. That timestamp overlapped with the 2-minute CCTV blackout. Ward felt the margin between protocol and instinct collapse into alignment. He informed Central Command that he was elevating the situation to Threat Level 2 under Juvenile Principal Protection Clause, citing coordinated technical interference and falsified clearance. The response from headquarters carried unmistakable strain. Written confirmation had not yet been finalized. Ward simply replied that delay increased vulnerability. After a measured pause, conditional authorization was granted. Additional units were dispatched discreetly toward the academy perimeter. Ward signaled his team to tighten formation around the visitor and initiate controlled questioning under recorded conditions. The morning air felt sharper now, colder against exposed skin. The academy remained calm behind stone walls, unaware that precaution had shifted into active defense. Ward understood that administrative scrutiny would follow his decision. Yet as he watched the visitor's controlled posture begin to fracture under sustained containment, he recognized that waiting for paperwork would have surrendered initiative. Procedure existed to preserve order. Instinct existed to preserve life. In that courtyard, under pale winter light, he had chosen which silence to break.
The additional security unit arrived without sirens, entering through the service access behind the east facade, their presence coordinated to avoid drawing attention from classrooms whose windows overlooked the courtyard. Ward observed their positioning through peripheral vision while maintaining direct engagement with the unauthorized visitor, who now stood within a controlled perimeter defined not by visible force but by measured distance. The visitor's device remained sealed. His identification documents were transferred to the arriving technical officer for deeper forensic review inside a mobile analysis case stationed discreetly near the gate. Ward requested that the academy administrator continue normal operations and restrict faculty movement between wings until further notice, framing it as a systems audit rather than a threat. Her expression showed concern, but not panic. That balance mattered. The young royal remained in the secondary classroom under 2 assigned guards, tutor continuing instruction as though routine had not shifted. Ward intended to preserve that illusion for as long as possible. Central Command transmitted preliminary findings from Palace administrative logs. Within the previous 48 hours, a junior scheduling aide had accessed the young royal's weekly academy timetable outside of standard update windows. The access occurred late in the evening, flagged initially as minor deviation but not escalated. Ward requested the aide's current location. Response: present inside Palace offices, unaware of active investigation. The timing aligned with the forged authorization code structure presented by the visitor. Internal schedule formatting appeared to have informed the falsified clearance. Ward approached the visitor again and asked without accusation how he had obtained precise knowledge of the child's arrival time down to the minute. The man replied that family members were kept informed. Ward did not challenge the statement verbally. Instead, he signaled for the technical officer to relay authentication results. The embedded chip within the visitor's identification card contained copied encryption patterns derived from an authentic Palace staff credential, but the signature key had been overwritten using external hardware. That level of replication required either direct access to internal credentials or cooperation from someone with authorized clearance. Ward felt the situation expand beyond a perimeter test into structured exploitation of internal trust.
He informed Central Command that the incident no longer represented isolated impersonation, but probable data leakage from palace administration. There was no theatrical reaction on the line, only a tightening of procedural tone. He was instructed to detain the visitor formally under security breach protocol, pending internal review. Ward issued the order calmly. The visitor's posture shifted from calculated patience to visible resistance, though he did not attempt physical escape. He stated that detention would create consequences beyond the courtyard. Ward responded that consequences had already arrived when falsified credentials were presented near a child. The guards secured the visitor's wrists with minimal force, guiding him toward the mobile unit for transfer. The courtyard remained outwardly unchanged, winter light steady against stone. Yet Ward understood that the breach had originated not at the gate, but somewhere within the palace's administrative quiet. As the visitor was escorted to the secured vehicle for transport, Ward remained momentarily in the courtyard, reviewing the sequence in his mind with disciplined clarity. 2-minute CCTV interruption, maintenance hatch footprint, forged authorization code modeled on authentic format, internal schedule access outside approved window. Each element alone suggested irregularity. Together they formed coordination requiring assistance from within restricted channels. Central Command confirmed that Palace Security had initiated discreet questioning of the junior scheduling aide, whose access logs appeared anomalous. Ward requested the aide's current location. Response: present inside Palace offices, unaware of active investigation. The timing aligned with the forged authorization code structure presented by the visitor. Internal schedule formatting appeared to have informed the falsified clearance. Ward approached the visitor again and asked without accusation how he had obtained precise knowledge of the child's arrival time down to the minute. The man replied that family members were kept informed. Ward did not challenge the statement verbally. Instead, he signaled for the technical officer to relay authentication results. The embedded chip within the visitor's identification card contained copied encryption patterns derived from an authentic Palace staff credential, but the signature key had been overwritten using external hardware. That level of replication required either direct access to internal credentials or cooperation from someone with authorized clearance. Ward felt the situation expand beyond a perimeter test into structured exploitation of internal trust. He informed Central Command that the incident no longer represented isolated impersonation, but probable data leakage from Palace administration. There was no theatrical reaction on the line, only a tightening of procedural tone. He was instructed to detain the visitor formally under security breach protocol, pending internal review. Ward issued the order calmly. The visitor's posture shifted from calculated patience to visible resistance, though he did not attempt physical escape. He stated that detention would create consequences beyond the courtyard. Ward responded that consequences had already arrived when falsified credentials were presented near a child. The guards secured the visitor's wrists with minimal force, guiding him toward the mobile unit for transfer. The courtyard remained outwardly unchanged, winter light steady against stone. Yet Ward understood that the breach had originated not at the gate, but somewhere within the palace's administrative quiet. As the visitor was escorted to the secured vehicle for transport, Ward remained momentarily in the courtyard, reviewing the sequence in his mind with disciplined clarity. 2-minute CCTV interruption, maintenance hatch footprint, forged authorization code modeled on authentic format, internal schedule access outside approved window. Each element alone suggested irregularity. Together they formed coordination requiring assistance from within restricted channels. Central Command confirmed that Palace Security had initiated discreet questioning of the junior scheduling aide, whose access logs appeared anomalous. Ward requested the aide's current location. Response: present inside Palace offices, unaware of active investigation. The timing aligned with the forged authorization code structure presented by the visitor. Internal schedule formatting appeared to have informed the falsified clearance. Ward approached the visitor again and asked without accusation how he had obtained precise knowledge of the child's arrival time down to the minute. The man replied that family members were kept informed. Ward did not challenge the statement verbally. Instead, he signaled for the technical officer to relay authentication results. The embedded chip within the visitor's identification card contained copied encryption patterns derived from an authentic Palace staff credential, but the signature key had been overwritten using external hardware. That level of replication required either direct access to internal credentials or cooperation from someone with authorized clearance. Ward felt the situation expand beyond a perimeter test into structured exploitation of internal trust. He informed Central Command that the incident no longer represented isolated impersonation, but probable data leakage from Palace administration. There was no theatrical reaction on the line, only a tightening of procedural tone. He was instructed to detain the visitor formally under security breach protocol, pending internal review. Ward issued the order calmly. The visitor's posture shifted from calculated patience to visible resistance, though he did not attempt physical escape. He stated that detention would create consequences beyond the courtyard. Ward responded that consequences had already arrived when falsified credentials were presented near a child. The guards secured the visitor's wrists with minimal force, guiding him toward the mobile unit for transfer. The courtyard remained outwardly unchanged, winter light steady against stone. Yet Ward understood that the breach had originated not at the...
By early afternoon, the Academy's schedule resumed its visible rhythm, though the perimeter geometry had shifted in ways only trained eyes would recognize. The pedestrian gate remained electronically sealed pending full hardware replacement, and an additional camera unit had been installed at a slightly lower angle to eliminate the blind arc previously exposed. Ward supervised the recalibration personally, observing the technician adjust frame alignment until the maintenance hatch and hedge line fell within uninterrupted coverage. The winter light had softened, casting long lines across the courtyard stones, and the faint echo of dismissal rehearsals drifted from inside as staff prepared for staggered departure. Ward requested confirmation that all juvenile timetables within Palace systems had been re-encrypted under temporary restricted access, limiting visibility to essential personnel only. Central Command confirmed compliance and reported that the junior aide had provided a full statement acknowledging negligent disclosure without awareness of coordinated misuse. Ward considered the phrasing carefully, negligence rather than malice. Vulnerability often entered through trust extended without verification. He instructed that the aide receive formal disciplinary review, but also protective monitoring. Individuals exploited once could be targeted again. Within the academy, the young royal completed the final lesson of the day unaware of perimeter recalibration or detained impersonation. Ward preferred it that way. When the time came for departure, he chose to return to the primary courtyard route deliberately, not as a restoration of routine, but as a controlled demonstration that the space remained secure. Guards repositioned with subtle precision, expanding coverage where earlier contraction had occurred.
The transport vehicle rolled into view, engine steady, door opened under measured supervision. The child emerged with satchel in hand, expression neutral, offering a polite nod to Ward as always. He returned the nod with identical composure. No change in tone, no alteration in posture. Safety preserved not through spectacle, but through absence of incident. As the vehicle departed Academy grounds, Ward remained until the gates sealed behind it and the convoy cleared the outer perimeter. Only then did he allow operational tempo to reduce from elevated posture to monitored vigilance. Headquarters transmitted preliminary commendation for decisive threat elevation, though the message was restrained, professional. Ward did not respond with acknowledgement beyond procedural receipt. He instead completed the on-site incident log, detailing sequence, timing, technical findings, and decision thresholds without embellishment. The report emphasized convergence of irregularities rather than singular anomaly. Documentation mattered. Future prevention depended on clarity free from drama. Before departing, he walked once more to the maintenance hatch where the frost had earlier impressed a single heel. The frost had melted under afternoon light, erasing the mark. He registered the symbolism without sentiment. Physical traces faded. Structural adjustments remained. Back at Palace headquarters, Ward attended a closed briefing with senior security officials and a liaison representing the prince. The atmosphere carried neither panic nor celebration, only administrative recalibration. Data from the confiscated device confirmed encrypted communication with an external coordinator who had guided timing relative to Academy arrival, instructing the visitor to approach only after verifying camera blackout success. The disruptor equipment had been activated briefly from the maintenance hatch area, then removed prior to contact attempt. Ward listened as analysts outlined the chain: external planning, internal timetable access through negligent disclosure, forged credentials modeled on authentic code architecture, and calculated pressure applied through invocation of private authority. It was a design built on subtlety rather than aggression. The liaison conveyed that Prince William had been informed immediately upon escalation and had authorized continued precaution without public disclosure. Ward inclined his head once at the mention, accepting the information without commentary. The focus remained operational integrity, not personal approval. Recommendations were drafted rapidly: rotational audits of administrative access logs, randomization of juvenile transport timing within controlled windows, mandatory dual verification for any external family approach, and continuous monitoring of minor system blackouts regardless of duration. Ward contributed one addition: that minor anomalies be cross-referenced across departments automatically, preventing compartmentalization of seemingly insignificant deviations. Silence followed, then agreement. The breach had not succeeded, but its architecture exposed reliance on assumption. As the meeting concluded, Ward submitted his final written account. In the closing line, he documented that elevation of threat status occurred prior to written confirmation due to cumulative irregularities presenting coordinated pattern risk. He did not reference instinct explicitly. The chronology spoke for itself. Later, alone in the operations corridor, he observed staff moving between offices with renewed caution. No alarms had sounded publicly. No headlines would form. The young royal would return to lessons the next morning under revised protocols invisible to casual observation. Ward understood that effective protection was measured not by confrontation but by prevention. The misuse of authority had been corrected quietly, the vulnerable shielded without awareness of proximity to leverage. As dusk settled against the palace windows, he reviewed the next day's transport plan. Slightly adjusted, unpredictably timed, redundancies reinforced. Procedure had briefly fallen silent during a 2-minute blackout. Instinct had filled the gap. Now procedure had been rewritten so that silence would not return unnoticed.